Welcome to another installment of Friday Q&A. I hope you are all excellent. If you have questions for next week's Q&A, and we are coming up on Q&A number 100 very, very soon, get them in the comments below. Ask me anything you like, no matter how spicy the question. I will try to take a bite out of it and answer your questions. If you're going to be in Perth at the start of December, Ragdoll are playing a show December 4th with our friends Hail Mary and Kestrels and Kites at the Indie Bar in Scarborough. It should be a wicked time and a great way to start summer down here. I'll put a link to the event in the video description. Similarly, if you want to support the channel and become a patron, there's a link for that in the video description. Or you can buy some of the music that I make with my guys in Ragdoll. Follow the Bandcamp link in the video description. Today, I'm playing my 1977 Fender Strat with some amazing Sir Michael Landau pickups into the Axe FX3. I've got a JFET compressor, the OCD model, and a JTM45 model in there. You just heard it, but let's hear it some more, and then I'll answer some questions. Let's start with some gear-related questions. I was asked about the Quilter range of amplifiers, and while I haven't tried one, I am very keen to try them. I saw a video, what feels like years ago, where someone was A-Bing, I forget who was doing it, but it was one of their little micro block pedal board amps against the JCM 800, and those clips sounded fantastic, but I'm more aware of them and more interested in them as a kind of modular amplification solution. A lot of people seem to be using these on their pedal boards together with things like a Helix or an FM3, basically whatever your modular of choice is. Go into the effects return of the Quilter and drive a cab. I use a Matrix GT800 effects whenever I want to do that, but a more compact version of that would be pretty cool. Matrix should come out with a pedal-sized power amp if they haven't already. I think I've talked about that before. Have they? Let me know in the comments. Or if you're using a Quilter and you like it, let me know in the comments. Let's go from contemporary gear all the way back. Did I see Robert Baker's video with the Art SGX? I did. What a wonderful thing. I've seen him and Mike Nielsen demo it now, and I mean, I have never ever wanted an Art processor, but there were some pretty good tones on there, and it feels like something that would fit in with the theme we've all been doing, where we're revisiting old rack gear. So I think that's something that has to happen, and just shout out to Robert and to Michael, because their channels are amazing. If you follow me and you don't follow them, go and do that. Go and subscribe to them. They're fantastic players. They seem like lovely dudes, and they pull amazing tones. So do that. Let's hear some more Strat. I'm gonna, as we go over this video, change pickups. So you heard the neck pickup and all that stuff at the start. Let's do the neck and the middle. This is what Strat life is about. And if you don't like that sound, I don't think you'll like guitar at all. Just my personal hot take right there. We're still talking about gear. Will I do a 5-minute tones striper style sound? Are you interested in that? I could probably do something like that. I always think of the kind of striper thing as a really good embodiment of what the 80s high gain tone was all about, like a really mid-heavy pre-boost into an amp that's already kind of cooking. So I kind of do that with my main guitar sound anyway, and I think it was Michael Sweet in Striper who used the Mesa Mark II or the Mark III or something like that. So that's probably a tone that's, you know, kind of in my wheelhouse already. So if you'd like to hear that on the Axe FX or something, let me know. Striper definitely had some really, really good tones and some really outrageous outfits, which I certainly approve of, if anything else. On the topic of the Mesa Mark series, Mark IV or Soldano Hot Rod 50 Plus, what amp's better for metal? That is like saying, you know, what guitar is better for playing music, a Strat or a Les Paul. They're both things that will do the job, but they're going to do it in a very, very different way. I have a Hot Rod 50 Plus that I absolutely adore, and you saw the video I did with the Mesa Mark IV where I just basically fell in love with the amp on camera, and that is something of a comparison that maybe I will have to do in the coming weeks without giving too much away. So just keep your eyes open for some more kind of Mark-ish related content coming very soon, hopefully next week. I've already said too much. Middle pickup, the Robin Trower pickup, as I like to call it on a Strat. Not quite the same without all the uni vibe and the echo and the fuzz and all that chewy goodness, but you kind of get the vibe going there. A few more gear related questions. How did my gig with the Boss RC500 go? I really liked it. I basically used it as a glorified single track looper and drum machine. But the thing that I liked so much about it was really easy, to start playing a song, tap in the tempo while I'm playing the intro of a song, and then create a loop and the rhythm track at the same time. So that has definitely passed muster in a live situation. And I did have a little external foot switch. I was asked about that on Instagram. If you watch the RC500 video, you would know that you can turn on and off parts of the drum kit. So I was going from just like a kind of kick drum sound to a kick and a snare, and I was turning it on and off with that little Eventide Tesla tap. Very, very cool. I do have a lot of Les Paul style guitars here, and I was asked about the String Butler. That's another piece of gear I have not tried, but several of my students who I teach online do have them, and they have raved about them. So I'm aware that it's a pretty good thing. Do you have a String Butler? If you're watching this, is there a particular model I should try out? That's something I'm more than happy to just go out and buy and try on the channel in case anyone is curious. So again, let me know in the video description because I have never tried one myself, and I have a couple of Les Pauls that, as much as I've done to them, they still really don't want to stay super in tune when I'm going nuts and bending. So that could be a fun thing to do there. And this is the last gear related question, but it's quite a fun one. Let's say we go back in time and it's, say, I don't know, the late 80s or the early 90s. What would my dream rack setup be? And at the moment, I would probably say if I had to go with a rack system, let's build it bottom up. Let's start with a power amp. I have never tried one of these personally, but again, shout out to Mike Nielsen. Anytime I hear him use his VHT power amp, it just sounds colossal. So I would probably go with like a VHT 250, and it seems like a lot of players at the time were using those. So that's the power amp. And how much are we going to allocate to effects? I would probably have an SPX 90 in there just for the symphonic patch. Let's say 3 rack units. Maybe some kind of lexicon thing for like delay and reverb, or maybe a TC 2290. Does that count? Because you can do modulation with that. And a third one, I'm a sucker for the old Rocktron Intel effects. I kind of like the 8-voice chorus on that one. So maybe go SPX 90 Intel effects, and let's just go all out on the delay with the 2290. Then for preamps, I would probably just go with the Mesa Studio preamp because I've got one of those and I love it. I know I didn't pick the ADA. Maybe I could do a biamp thing and use the ADA or something in there, but I think for just my kind of bread and butter tones, the clean sound on the Studio Pre is amazing, and the crunch and the rhythm sound are just fantastic. Maybe I would use 2 of them, one as a dedicated boost or a tri-axis, something like that, and then stick it in like a Bradshaw rack with the Bradshaw like rack interface and the mixing system, so you can mix things in parallel and just go all out. And this is why I'm glad the Axe-Fx 3 exists, because if those were the only options available, I would probably be using that system. And I mean, I wouldn't say I would be more broke, but I wouldn't be able to have as many cool collectible pieces of gear, because you can do all of that and so much more with the Axe. And the Axe is only 3 rack units, or the FM3, which is like this big. So I like entertaining those fantasies of those old racks, but I also love the fact that we can do all of that in a much smaller, much more convenient and compact format at the moment. But yeah, that would kind of be my rack. And I don't know, maybe some weird thing that everyone had back then, like I would just put those Art SGX 200 graphics on everything. That needs to be on a t-shirt. Hey, someone should do that. Someone should do that. All right, let's talk about playing for a second. The death grip, when you pick harder and you play faster, you also press harder. How do you get away from that sort of thing? Without it being a super in-depth thing, I would recommend go and obviously watch all of Troy Grady's stuff if you haven't already, because he has a great thing on the breakdown of picking mechanics. But also Kiko Loureiro, who's now the guitarist in Megadeth. I always think of him as the guitarist in Angra. I remember hearing Angra years ago when I was getting to bands like Symphony X and Dream Theater and Angra. Here's a really great lesson talking about how to practice, not pressing too hard. Can you hear that car in the background? Like, what is somebody doing at 1:53 in the afternoon? I'll leave that in. Anyway, so Kiko kind of talks about, this sort of exercise. I'll do it with a cleanish sound here. So where if you were playing, say, a legato pattern, I don't know, something like this. Let's make that the little pattern. His whole thing is like, do that, but basically don't press. So play it like this. And then get used to the way that feels, and then gradually just slowly press a little bit harder. Don't play any faster, don't pick any harder, just press slightly harder. And I've found that really, really useful over the last couple of months since I saw that video, just to like not put as much effort in but still get the same result. So if I just start pressing a little bit harder, the onset of actually making a note requires a lot less force than you probably expect. So I'll go from like no notes to notes just by pushing very gradually harder. Something like that. That's just a simple example. You can hear with this sort of tone that I'm playing with at the moment that pressing harder definitely gives you more gain and more sustain, but that's what gain is for. So don't be afraid to play with a light touch with even more gain and you'll get this. And there, the difference between pressing really hard and pressing softly is kind of mitigated. Plus, I think the thing is, if you're trying to practice that style of legato playing, that soft touch is actually really important. You have, I guess, what I would call like fusion legato, where you don't press too hard, and then you have like heavy metal legato, where you're doing hammer-ons and pull-offs, but the notes are still really accented, so it's actually not musical legato, and I know people argue about this all the time, so I won't get into that. The other thing would then be, just take a simple kind of like a blues riff or something like that, and just practice pressing the same amount, but picking, not harder, but by dipping your pick deeper relative to the string. So what I mean is having more pick in contact with the string. So you can go from something like this. So I started to pick a little bit harder at the end, but I wasn't pressing any harder. And those differences are subtle, but very, very important. So using just the tip of the pick is basically going to give you a very different attack and a kind of different intensity than if you play with the pick kind of dug in much further. So I would recommend those two things, those two exercises. One where instead of worrying about the intensity of like how hard you pick and how hard you hit the string, change the depth of the pick and kind of maintain the same force in your hand. And then similar thing with your left hand, just practice that parameter of how hard do I press as you go forward. And those weren't the most amazing sounding examples, I know, but this might be a good thing that I could get into as a standalone lesson on my Patreon. So if there's any patrons watching this and you want to see that, also let me know. And of course, shill, sign up to my Patreon if you want to see some more in-depth lessons just like that. Alrighty, I think that's about it for today. Oh no, there is one more question, and this relates to actually there's two more questions, my apologies. The IR player in the Axe FX3 is just a cab block without all the preamp controls on it, so it's like, it literally just loads an IR. You don't have stuff like the room reverb simulation or things like there's preamp emulation in there. So it's basically a good way, if you don't use any of that stuff, to save some CPU in your Axe FX3 presets by just using an IR player block. A lot of the time, In my presets, I use them to load up tone matches. So I can have a raw amp, a tone match, and then any cab I like. I call that amp matching. Some people might call it profiling. Kind of similar sort of thing there. So that's what the IR player does. And I lied. There's actually another 2 questions in here. So would we ever consider doing any ragdoll remixes? That's something that you might hear a little bit of in the future. There's a particular track that I had Ryan come in and sing recently that I had reworked in a particular style, which I really like and we all really like. So we're going to put that out at some point. I don't know if it really counts as a remix, but it's like a reimagining, and it's not a rock or a metal thing either. So yeah. But if you do like the 80s, you'll probably still like it. I've probably given the game away there. So that, and then the last final question. If you see any of my videos and you ask me, hey, where do I set the knobs on my Marshall DSL or my rectifier to get the tone? That's not the point of those videos. The point of those videos is that you're listening to a mic'd up cab. So the type of speaker that I'm using, the type of microphone preamp, and the guitar that I'm playing into it probably contribute more to the tone than like whether I have the bass at 3 or the bass at 5. A lot of the time I selectively leave that out because the idea is you have knobs on the amp, they are tactile, they are very easy and straightforward to twist. All I would say is when you're dialing in an amp, try 0 and try 10 and just see what a particular control does. You know, if you want to know how much bass your amp has, start at 0, then also try it on 10. If you want to know if your controls are interactive, twist 2 knobs at the same time and use a looper pedal into them. It's not about where the knobs are set, it's about the entire system. It's about your preferences and about your ears. And I think that kind of sums up the topic of this entire channel and this Q&A. I'm going to drink some more tea, eat some more bickies, and play a bit more guitar for you. Have a fantastic weekend. I will see you all.